Wyverns creatures of legend, myth, and more recently, the stuff of nightmares in video games like The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. But how did these winged, two-legged beasts go from symbols of medieval heraldry to formidable foes in one of the most popular modern fantasy RPGs? Wyverns have deep roots in European folklore, known for their fierce appearance and snake-like tails. Unlike their more famous cousins, the dragons, wyverns were often depicted with just 2 legs and no fire-breathing ability. Their symbolism, however, is just as potent, representing everything from danger to power and protection. But in The Witcher 3, wyverns take on a much darker and more terrifying form. These creatures are swift, deadly, and laced with venom, offering players one of the many deadly challenges in the game's monster-filled world. So what makes these creatures so fascinating, and how do their real-world origins differ from their brutal portrayal in The Witcher? In this video, we'll explore the history and folklore of wyverns, and how they've been adapted for the world of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Let's dive into the lore and legend of wyverns. The wyvern, a creature born from the imagination of ancient and medieval minds, has slithered its way through history. Its name, derived from the Latin word vipera, meaning viper, hints at its origins as a venomous snake. But this is no ordinary snake. The term wyvern first appeared in the English language during the 17th century, evolving from the Middle English wyver, itself borrowed from Anglo-French givre. Initially, it referred to venomous serpents, but over time the concept merged with imagery of winged reptiles. In folklore, the wyvern is typically depicted as a 2-legged winged creature, distinct from the more powerful 4-legged dragons. Unlike dragons, wyverns rarely breathe fire. Instead, they are associated with poison and venom, often seen as harbingers of disease and destruction. Wyverns played an important role in heraldry, frequently appearing on coats of arms, banners, and seals. In British heraldry, for example, wyverns became symbols of power and might, often representing dangerous, untamed forces that needed to be conquered or controlled. The imagery of wyverns spans cultures around the Mediterranean and Northern Europe, from medieval manuscripts to church carvings. As mythical creatures, they were often placed in the same category as serpents and dragons, representing chaos and the unknown. Some even believed wyverns to be descendants of ancient creatures like the Egyptian winged snake, Wadjet. A particularly curious example of a wyvern can be found in a 14th century manuscript, where one is depicted with a second head at the end of its tail, a clear sign of the fantastical nature of these creatures. Over time, wyverns shifted from being mere heraldic symbols to becoming staples of fantasy literature, games, and art. Today, they are most commonly known as lesser dragons, creatures who still embody many of the deadly characteristics attributed to them centuries ago: power, venom, and an ominous presence in dark, untamed places. While they may no longer guard the banners of knights or the crests of noble families, wyverns still capture the imagination as symbols of untamed power, venomous, winged beasts that straddle the line between fantasy and nightmare. In The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, wyverns are far more than mere symbols. These terrifying, deadly creatures are brought to life as monstrous foes that players must confront in the wilds of the continent. But how does The Witcher's portrayal of the wyvern compare to its roots in folklore and history? Visually, The Witcher 3's wyverns stay true to many of the traditional elements. They have 2 powerful legs, large, leathery wings, and a long, barbed tail reminiscent of their historical counterparts. But unlike the more serpentine wyverns of medieval manuscripts, the wyverns in The Witcher take on a more beastly, reptilian appearance, much like a predator straight out of a nightmare. The developers at CD Projekt Red put great care into making wyverns feel like natural, yet terrifying apex predators. Their design leans into reptilian feature scales, sharp claws, and deadly fangs, making them more like dragons than their historical versions, which were often smaller and more snake-like. In The Witcher 3, wyverns are known for their speed and aerial agility. They attack fiercely from the sky, swooping down on their prey with deadly precision. This behavior mirrors some aspects of their heraldic origins, where wyverns were seen as swift, dangerous creatures, but here their threat is far more tangible. Wyverns in The Witcher 3 are also armed with venomous barbs on their tails, reinforcing the connection to their folkloric roots as venomous creatures. In historical accounts, wyverns were often linked with disease and poison, and in the game, their venom can be just as deadly if you're not prepared. Wyverns in The Witcher are not just mindless beasts, they are territorial predators with nests where they bring their prey. These creatures embody a primal, untamed aspect of nature, much like their representations in medieval folklore, where they symbolize chaotic forces to be reckoned with. The Witcher bestiary describes wyverns as cruel, cunning hunters that live in forests, swamps, and mountains. They're not magical creatures like some of the monsters Geralt faces, but natural predators that have adapted to survive in the harshest environments. Another nod to their real-world origins in folklore, where they were seen as dangerous forces of nature. While the wyverns in The Witcher 3 stay faithful to many traditional elements, their design is clearly adapted to fit the dark, gritty world of the game. They are no longer just symbols of danger on a banner, but living, breathing threats that challenge players to survive. At first glance, the wyverns of Hıstory and The Witcher may seem worlds apart, one a symbol of medieval power and the other a living, breathing predator. But as we dig deeper, we'll find that the wyvern in both worlds shares several key traits, even as their depictions have evolved over time. Historically, wyverns were primarily symbolic. They appeared in heraldry representing strength, power, and sometimes disease. In contrast to the four-legged dragon, the wyvern's two-legged form signified a more agile, dangerous creature less grounded and more swift in its menace. In The Witcher 3, wyverns fully embrace this agile, aerial nature, striking from the sky in swift, venomous attacks. In medieval Europe, wyverns were used to project power and control. On crests and shields, they stood as guardians of territory and symbols of dominance. But in The Witcher 3, these creatures are no longer guardians. They are feral predators, defending their nests and hunting anything that dares enter their territory. One core feature that both historical and Witcher wyverns share is their association with venom. In medieval lore, wyverns were often linked to disease and poison, viewed as carriers of illness or deadly wounds. In The Witcher 3, this characteristic is fully realized in combat. Wyverns use their tails to deliver lethal venomous strikes, staying true to their folklore roots. Physically, The Witcher 3's wyverns are more reptilian and dragon-like, with detailed scales, fangs, and claws. Historical wyverns, by contrast, were often depicted in a simpler, more symbolic manner, less concerned with realistic details, and more focused on their role as icons of power. These differences reflect the shift in how we view monsters today. In the past, they were abstract, but in modern fantasy, they're grounded in a gritty realism. In heraldry, wyverns were static symbols, protectors, or icons of ferocity. But in The Witcher 3, they've become dynamic, living creatures. They build nests, defend their young, and actively hunt in the game's ecosystems, transforming from emblematic creatures into beings with their own behavior and lore. The shift from symbol to predator can also be seen in how these creatures interact with people. Historically, wyverns represented external threats, plagues, enemies, or other forces to be feared. In The Witcher, however, wyverns are tangible threats, monsters that Geralt must fight, subduing their physical danger rather than just symbolic power. Perhaps the greatest difference is the role these creatures play. In history, wyverns often acted as protectors, symbols of strength and vigilance on noble crests. In The Witcher 3, however, they've been stripped of any symbolic nobility and transformed into enemies, posing a direct threat to anyone who crosses their path. From their roots as symbolic guardians to their portrayal as wild predators, wyverns have certainly come a long way. But whether they're flying above a knight's banner or swooping down to attack Geralt, they remain a creature that demands respect, a reminder of the wild and untamed forces that lurk just beyond our control. From ancient manuscripts to modern video games, the wyvern has cemented its place as one of the most iconic mythical creatures in pop culture. Though it began as a symbol of power and danger in medieval Europe, the wyvern's journey through centuries of storytelling has given it new life, especially in the realms of fantasy fiction, gaming, and popular media. Perhaps nowhere is the wyvern more prominent today than in the world of video games. From The Witcher 3 to Dark Souls, wyverns have become staples of fantasy games, where they often play the role of fierce adversaries, challenging players with their aerial prowess and deadly venom. But it's not just video games where wyverns thrive. In fantasy films and TV shows, wyverns are often depicted alongside dragons, adding to the rich tapestry of mythical creatures that populate these worlds. Their presence in these blockbusters reinforces their status as key players in the fantasy genre. Wyverns have also long been a part of the literary world, especially in high fantasy novels and tabletop RPGs. In Dungeons & Dragons, wyverns are distinct from dragons, smaller but no less deadly. Their role as dangerous, yet fascinating creatures is something that has carried over into other modern fantasy works, influencing countless authors and creators. Interestingly, wyverns continue to hold symbolic power even outside of fantasy worlds. The creature is used in logos for everything from chocolate brands like Lindt to sports teams like the Japanese Passlab Yamagata Wyverns. This shows how deeply embedded wyverns have become in our collective imagination, transitioning from medieval crests to modern commercial logos. From heraldry to video games, wyverns have evolved with the times, shifting from symbolic guardians to monstrous predators. Their adaptability across mediums reflects our enduring fascination with creatures that embody both danger and mystery. Wyverns have not only become fixtures in games and stories, but also a favorite among fantasy fans. Their distinct two-legged, winged form sets them apart from the more common dragons, giving them a unique identity that resonates with gamers, readers, and moviegoers alike. In The Witcher 3 and beyond, wyverns continue to capture our imagination, serving as both adversaries to be defeated and symbols of untamed nature. They remind us that even in a world of fantastical creatures, there are still those that exist on the fringes, powerful, wild, and always fascinating. The wyvern's enduring presence in pop culture is a testament to its power as a mythical creature. From ancient symbols of protection to fierce enemies in the world of gaming, the wyvern remains an iconic part of our storytelling tradition, its wings still casting shadows over our imagination. From the myths of medieval Europe to the immersive world of The Witcher 3, the wyvern continues to soar through our imaginations. Whether they serve as symbols of power or deadly foes, these creatures have adapted to every era of storytelling, reminding us of the primal forces they represent. As we've seen, the wyvern's journey from heraldry to modern fantasy has shaped its evolution in fascinating ways. It's not just a relic of the past, but a creature that continues to play a vital role in how we explore the boundary between myth and reality. Whether you're a fan of fantasy lore or an adventurer in The Witcher, the wyvern remains a creature to be respected and feared, its wings still casting shadows over the stories we tell today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into wyvern lore and their evolution, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content on mythology, folklore, and gaming. Thanks for watching, and until next time.